Welcome to Schupak Sports. This is Marty Schupak. Today I have a special guest, a very old friend, Danny Bernstein of Backyard Sports. Danny, how are you?
I'm doing great, Marty. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you. Danny, let's get right into it, and then we're going to go a little bit of your background, a few questions for you.
You got it.
I think we had similar upbringings, you and I just wanted to ask you, I'm sure you spent your childhood like me, every day after school going out for hours, shooting hoops, playing soccer, stickball, whatever. Today, it's a little different. What do you think the three biggest changes are as far as kids today playing sports and when we were kids?
Absolutely. So let's not couch this conversation in nostalgia. Otherwise, I think we're going to lose our audience because we know we're not going back to, I'm going to date you here, Marty, but we're definitely not going back to 1974, 1975.
Okay.
Right? When we played in the schoolyard, we played in the backyard. And I know we're not going to be doing that again, but the things that changed between now and then, there are three issues at stake. The first is, when we played, we were intrinsically motivated by the games. In other words, our activities were not being set up by the parents. They were chosen by us. And because of that, because we were out there, we supplied our own equipment, we regulated our own play, we made our own decisions. And we didn't always reach the best decisions, but at least they were our decisions. So one of the big changes I see between now and then is the idea of creating and the kids becoming stakeholders in the game have been taken away from them because now it's administered by adults. So that's the first thing. So there's an intrinsic way we played, and now it's all being fed to them from the outside.
Right.
The second difference I see today is that back when we went to the schoolyard, last time I checked, no one was charging an admissions fee. We just kind of did it on their own, and sports wasn't so resources and money had nothing to do with our involvement. Now that there's a transaction involved in most sports today, it brings the parents in, and because of that, the kids aren't players anymore. Now they're customers and clients. So if the parent is not satisfied with the way the program is being held, or if they have an issue with the coach, or if they see their kids struggling, they will, because that kid now is, because it's a transactional element, they're involved and they want to correct it. And because of that, kids are not allowed to find themselves freely or suffer or struggle because the parents are always kind of intervening and making changes.
Right.
So that's the second thing I see. And then
I want to stop you there. Hold that thought. You know the third,
okay,
because I don't want to forget. Going back to the first one, do you think that there's too much regimentation and that the kids, they don't have the challenge of like conflict resolution? Like, you fouled me. No, you did. Yes, you did. No, you did. That ball was fair. That ball was foul.
Yeah, I've got one better for you. Not only is there an inability to regulate themselves, and this was going to also it also harks on the third point I was going to make, because kids are stratified based on ability today, and it's adult and it's program imposed as opposed. Look, when we went out there, we chose the teams. Yeah, there was always a kid who was kind of chosen last, and that might not make the kid feel good, but it was always within a box and never went outside the box. So because of that, because the kids aren't left on their own, that's exactly right. They're not building resolution skills, and most importantly, Marty, they're not building leadership skills.
Right.
Because when we played, there was always a variety of talent and ability within the group of kids. And you knew who the best athletes were. You didn't have to be told. And those athletes and those kids instructed the other players on how to get better. And that peer-to-peer teaching is so important because it made the kids owners and stakeholders of their own play. I watch a lot of high school games.
Right.
And it's amazing that even kids who are playing at that level, they're not looking at one another. They're still looking into the stands. They're looking at their parents for some sort of affirmation or accommodation. They're not getting it amongst themselves. And that is what, and I believe kids are losing so much by having that process of creative play interfered with.
Right. And did you mention the third thing?
Yeah, the third thing is, of course, is the stratification of talent at a very, very early age.
All right. I want to ask you about a situation that's happening right now, and then I want to get into your background and what you've done. You mentioned you watch a lot of high school sports. I'm a big fan of high school sports too. And for years, I used to go to the county center in Westchester and watch that tournament. I haven't been in a few years, but I have a number of friends that are involved in different leagues. One in particular in softball league here in Rockland County, and he's telling me about the issues of getting officials and referees, and that there have been some scheduled scholastic varsity games that had to be canceled because they don't have enough referees or officials. I just want your opinion on that.
Yeah, well, no, it goes back into the changes in sports today is because that the parental equation has leveraged so much of play. We are so focused on when we were kids, we weren't focused on getting into college. We weren't focused on a scholarship. We weren't focused on making an A team. We were just focused on the process of play. We were just focused on getting as much out of being with our friends and playing as possible. Now that this result, as opposed to this process of play, has taken over, what has happened is because the parents are attached to their young athletes at the hip, every game, every call in their mind is a hiccup or a bump in the road to their child's destination.
Right.
And as a result, is they've kind of stepped over that line. Look, when we played Little League, there was always that Little League dad, right, who always had a bug up his butt and was always arguing everything. But he was an anomaly.
Yes.
But it's not an anomaly anymore. And that's the behavior which parents have adopted on the sidelines. And as a result, one of the consequences of this is that's right. The behavior has gotten so bad, and that the referees have gotten accosted after games, is that they're fearing for their own safety, or they're just saying this isn't fun anymore.
Yeah, go ahead.
And they're staying away. And as a result, there is definitely a void in people coming into high school sports and to youth sports now to get involved because they just don't feel safe doing it.
Is there any resolution to that you've either thought about or spoken to people in your field, or maybe they have to give a warning and clear the stands?
It's larger than that. None mandates don't work. Once you charge, and look what's going on in our country right now. Because this country is where we're facing the issues is because we're trying to regulate everything from the top, and people forgot how to connect with one another and have conversations from the bottom. So, short of asking parents to not attend games or keeping parents away from games, I don't see the issue changing. I think we need to see a paradigm shift as to what our attitudes are going to be toward our student athletes and what is it we really want from these games. And until you really face that down, this behavior is not going to change.
And you touched upon that, and we're going to get into your background in just a second. I have one more question related. You touched upon, and I actually had a question, and you took it out of my mouth, process versus results. How parents, they overreact to every single call, every single change in the batting order the coach makes, every single change in playing time in basketball. As of late, and I'm sure you're familiar with name, image, and likeness, which is going on right now in college, where players are getting paid a lot more.
Yeah.
From what you said, Danny, I think it's going to get worse rather than better. Just like you said, until they change their attitudes. But the thing is, we're in a capitalist society, so money orientated, that this name, image, and likeness is just putting under a microscope and magnifying every single call. So I just want your opinion on this.
Yeah, and it's not just Marty. That's one pathway, because obviously we're talking about the top 0.001% of kids who are going to go on to a Division III school. We're going to afford this opportunity. But it's not just those athletes, because even in the suburb, even in the more affluent areas, sports just isn't a pathway to a career. Sports is a pathway to to college admission. I mean, look what happened with, what the irony that these parents were using sport coaches whose kids weren't even athletes to create that faux pedigree to get their kids in. Well, what about those parents who think that, without shooting down any school, instead of going to a state school, maybe my kid can go play, soccer at Kenyon College or Tufts or Colby. So right away at 8, 9 years old, those parents are looking at sports as an inroad for their kids' own pedigree. You go out on a Friday night of a typical 9 and 10-year-old and sit around a table with a bunch of parents. What are they talking about? They're talking about their careers. They're talking about Ukraine. They're talking about the stock. No, they're talking about their kids' college, their kids' youth sports activities.
Right.
So even youth sports in an affluent suburban environment, sports has taken on a larger than life social component.
I promise. One more question. I'm going to get right to you. I always thought, Danny, I wasn't a good student, and luckily my kids were. Of course, they take after my wife, but I always thought that some of these parents, they're pushing their kids in high school to start their senior year in community college. And my wife and I would look at each other and said, what are they doing? Why don't they let these kids be kids? I just could never understand that. So anyway, that's my little editorial comment. We're talking to Danny Bernstein. He's a huge person in the field of youth sports. He started a company called Backyard Sports a number of years ago. Danny, tell us about your background and how you got into sports and backyard sports.
Absolutely. So Backyard Sports is 15 years old. I'm 61, so if you do the math, I didn't start this until my mid 40s. I love that commercial where you see the guy operating on a patient and he says, "Oh, doctor, you must be so talented." He goes, "No, I slept in a Holiday Inn last night." I was in the ladies' sleepwear business. I was in the clothing business. It was a family business, and I found and it was a third generation business. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, the industry took a sea change, and we got out of the business, and I was forced to make another decision about my career path. So at the time where I was getting out of the business, my kids were 4 and 5 years old, and I saw the environment that they were playing into in first and second grade. And I saw that it wasn't the environment which we had when we were kids. And not only did I see it as being different, but I also saw it as being destructive, because parents were very tight on the sidelines. They were not enjoying watching their kids play. Kids were struggling. Parent coaches were struggling, and the experience wasn't fun. And part of it had to do with the introduction of travel sports. And I saw travel sports coming down from middle school to 5th grade to 3rd grade. And I saw that there was this sea of pressure being placed on kids. So Backyard Sports came at a time in my life where I was looking for a new career, but I thought I could make a contribution. Albeit I was athletic. I wasn't a great athlete. But like you, Marty, and so many people who were probably paying attention to this webcast, is that we had so many positive experiences when we played. We had great friends, we had mentors, we had experiences, and we still had the stories which framed who we were as adults. And I saw kids as not having those opportunities to frame these stories. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of create not an alternative, but maybe what I saw as being an antidote to this hyper-competitive sport culture. It wasn't about going back to 1974. It wasn't just throwing some balls out, some sticks out, letting kids play, but it was changing the prism of how sports was looked at. And the first thing we would start was we would be process over result. We would give kids a chance to make mistakes without condemning them. We would give kids a chance to play without having to separate the A, B, and C players, with the recognition that there are so many social skills that can be gained by kids playing together. And the way I was going to do this was by using teacher coaches, not necessarily coaches. Coaches need to win. Coaches need to put their identity and merit in what is going on in the moment. Teachers are those willing to plant the seeds and say, you know what, we're not going to see the results today, but we're going to see them years from now, and they'd be patient with the process. So that's what Backyard Sports was meant to be. We were going to glean those values from creative play when the kids were young, put it in a competitive environment, but use teachers to accelerate the social development, what goes on in the playing fields that the kids could bring off of the playing fields. So
Right.
not only were we going to turn out good athletes, but we were going to turn out good athletic citizens.
You started it 15 years ago.
Yes.
And you're a nonprofit.
No, but we are actually two organizations. We have a profit organization which has this mission-driven approach towards sports. We work with affluent communities, and we work with rec departments, and we do summer programs using this philosophy of developing student citizens.
Okay.
And then the not-for-profit Backyard Sports Cares take these same principles, and now what we do with that is we bring it to the underserved areas of Westchester and children with cognitive and emotional challenges.
Right. And
so we expand the boat of all children can use this platform of sports to develop themselves.
Just so our audience knows, because we, believe it or not, it does go out all over the world. Westchester County is a large county that abuts New York City, just north of the Bronx. Danny, give us your website, which I'll put down on the channel after this. What is the website of Backyard?
We have two. It's www.byardsports.com.
BR Sports.
Yard, BYARD sports.com.
Okay.
We couldn't get Backyard. There was a computer company that had that, so we're B-Yard.
Yeah. Okay.
And then our not-for-profit is www.byardsportscares.org.
Okay. All right. Now you were in business. You've been doing this for 15 years. Give me an idea of the numbers you had, let's say your second year of business, and what the numbers are right now.
Currently, when we started, whereas I thought that where everybody applauded and offered me accolades in taking this position, to not take on the sports machine, but at least offer an alternative. Everybody clapped. Marty, it was very difficult to convince people to get their kids off the treadmill.
Right, I understand.
It was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's a great irony. My organization developed because I just want to comment on what Westchester is like. Even though it's a suburban county outside of New York City, it's a county of great proximity. So you have mixed resource places like White Plains and Yonkers and New Rochelle. And then you have areas like Rye, which borders on Portchester, and which are areas of great affluence, which borders on areas of great resource need. And you have areas like Scarsdale, which is 2 or 3 miles from Mount Vernon.
Right.
So we have areas of affluence and areas of need sitting very, very tightly to one another. So what I started doing is I started going to these community centers and agencies, and I started scholarshiping kids into my programs,
right,
just to fill the numbers and fill the void.
Sure.
And an interesting thing happened. Sports did exactly what I thought it would do. It would bring kids of economic difference together, giving them the platform to play, and it was so easy for them to bond because once you're out there and playing, the conversation follows. You're already attached at the hip.
Yeah.
And and then when we were doing these compassionate programs, I was approached by special needs families if I would offer athletic programming, recreational programming to kids on the autism spectrum.
Right.
And we did the same thing, Marty. We took kids who needed a little bit of extra help, and we took young student athletes. We put them in the same environment, not as a community service project, but for them to play together.
Right. And I'm going to get into that BYS Plus in a minute. Your organization, I looked, and you have some very qualified instructors. Okay. At this point, how do you recruit your instructors? I know that at the beginning you had to go out, do a lot of legwork, right, but now did it flip-flop like it does in sales where they're coming to you or whatever? Well, what are the qualifications?
Well, the qualifications are, people want to share their compassion of play and being able to use that with a population of kids who really want to be there. This was a very quick example. We run a program on Friday nights at Purchase College for underserved tennis players. We have between 60 and 80 players coming up every Friday night for their first introduction of tennis. And exactly to your point, who are the people we get as pros? Well, we get a lot of high school students to volunteer, but I partner with a wonderful woman. Her name is Dale Ballin, who has been around the tennis community for over 30, 40 years, and she truly is iconic. She recruits coaches and instructors off country club courts who are on Fridays. They're there for 7-8 hours, and they come to Purchase College at 6 o'clock at night just because they love to share their passion of play with kids who have never been exposed to tennis before. And that's what true teacher coaches want to do.
Right.
They just don't want to take the box. They just don't want to check the box. They want to share their passion and improve the game.
Right. You're 100%
and so
right.
We have been able to create that platform to give coaches the opportunity to do what they love to do. Teach in an unfettered way, teach for the love of game, and teach with kids who have that intrinsic, I keep going back to that, who want to be there.
Have you ever done anything with the USTA? Because I know they have. Oh, you have?
Yeah, and they're in White Plains, and we're very, very close to them. We're very fortunate to receive funding from them over the past 5-6 years.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Danny, just so people have an idea, and I'm fairly straightforward. I understand how you work. Tell the lay person out there, do you compete with programs such as Little League, and what's the difference, let's say, in baseball?
I don't think we compete with Little League. I think everyone needs to play Little League because that's what people do. We need to play this league. There's no reason why a kid from Eastchester has to travel up to Brewster on a Saturday afternoon, to play a baseball game. And there's no reason why the family has to be stretched. We don't look to stand on a soapbox and yell at people and say we need to return to simpler days. All Backyard Sports wants to do is just be a model for what we think is a vision for youth sports.
Okay.
And unfortunately, because sports has become such a big business, Marty, everyone has gotten to be very territorial about their numbers and about their kids. Right. And as opposed to having to work together and really identify what are we doing this for in the first place. We want to give the kids a great positive experience. And that doesn't mean owning it. That means sharing it.
All right. I'm under the impression that you're like me in the fact that travel sports, like travel baseball, sometimes is overdone. Number one, do you think it's overdone? Number two, I heard a guy talk about his organization. They have a travel team for U6 players, which makes no sense to me. So I want your opinion on travel sports.
When we were young, Marty, from your town, you knew who the top 15 baseball players of your friends were. Everyone knew it.
Right.
And you didn't need to try out. They were just there. The way travel has evolved. And again, it becomes part of the social pedigree. It's not enough just to have the 12 best kids and go out and play a couple of games. Now travel has become the tonic for what sports is. So now, if you want any sort of any sort of pathway to a varsity position, you have to be playing a travel sport. So what happens if your kid doesn't make a travel team? You're going to go form your own travel team, or you're going to go somewhere else because there will always be someone willing to take the money to put the team together. Right. And you've seen what has happened over the past 10, 15 years. Now travel sports aren't good enough. Now you have to be part of some elite regional team, correct?
Right. And I want to just interject one thing. I'm sorry, Danny.
Yeah.
If I try to hold my questions, I'll never remember them.
So go, please. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's okay. And we're talking to Danny Bernstein of Backyard Sports, who's done an incredible job in the youth sports field. Danny, your program, I think, is pretty good with basketball from what I see. And the question I want to ask, and excuse the interruption, is that I was told a number of years ago, I'm talking about the New York area, that a lot of these talented basketball players, their AAU team is more important than their high school team.
Correct.
Is there a lot of truth to that?
Of course. Well, look what the soccer community did. I mean, the elite soccer clubs, made their players choose whether you're going to play soccer on the club team or that you couldn't play high school soccer. Just and because of that, what's the message which would pair well if they're being restricted, this must be a very, very special team because it's only for an isolated number of kids. So again, it sells the sexiness of being part of something larger than what it really is.
Right.
So it just accelerates the cycle of where this thing is going. And once the coffers of that travel team or elite team are filled, someone else is going to form another elite team. Right.
That's right.
Because someone is going to be very willing to take money, and there's going to be someone very willing to pay for it. And the cynical cycle of pay for play just keeps growing and growing and growing. And look at the cost of that. The kids are taken out of their community. They're not playing with their friends. They're not doing this why they should be doing this in the first place.
You're right. But what's funny, Danny, because I was very involved with baseball. A lot of these kids were in one travel team or two, but they loved it. Everyone I spoke to, they loved it.
Yeah.
Which is unbelievable to me. All right, let me just.
All right, but let's take that argument. So they loved it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you want. But you're telling me that 200 kids love it or the next 300 kids love it. I mean, that's just it. These kids who are special athletes, who they are and they know who they are. Right. They have that fire in them. And Marty, they're going to get to where they need to be anyway. I mean, if you really want to look at this thing down the road and you want to look at the incidence of just surgeries and Tommy John surgeries, which are plaguing, Major League Baseball right now, you think they have these problems because all of a sudden at 23, 24 years old, their arms and shoulders and wrists are flaring up? Speaking of orthopedists, it's not because they're throwing harder at 23, 24 years old. It's because they're throwing a ball at 8 years old to 19 years old, and they're throwing a ball 12 months a year, doing the same thing. And that idea of love, look, my kids love chocolate ice cream, but that doesn't mean I'm taking them out every day and buying them a gallon of chocolate ice cream. I have to be the parent also.
Right.
And I have to say, look, we like things, we love things, but there's a time and place for everything. Right. As parents, we have to put ourselves back in there and give back to our kids their childhood.
All right, Danny, as we're entering like the fourth quarter of this.
All right, I'm sorry.
You're doing great. This is wonderful. Are you kidding? You're a great interview. Usually a couple of days a week, I'll just Google youth sports issues trending. Yeah. And before we got on, I did it today in the article. I'm going to ask you about one issue. They mentioned 5 issues: kids quitting early, specialization, too expensive, stress, not fun, and the wrong goals. I think we could all agree that all those 5 are right. But I want to ask you, you touched upon it, specialization, kids playing 12 months a year. As somebody in your field, what would you recommend to some parents that have a kid who, let's say, is a tremendous basketball player or a tremendous baseball player as far as specialization?
Listen to your kid. Listen to your kid. Be the parent. Don't be the driver. Let your kid drive their childhood. Let your kid and your young athlete drive the process. And because I know this, I'm 61 years old and I've seen it so many times now. Kids will get there with the garbage or without the garbage.
Right.
Better to go through it as a parent without the garbage. I'm trying to be diplomatic in my talk. I don't know if this is a G-rated podcast.
No, it's G, but an R, no rating. But
no rating. That's what I'm saying. So I'm going to go back. As a parent, be there, and we have choices we can make, and this goes to the question of the incidents. This goes to the questions of the yelling and the screaming at the referees, because I see it with my own friends, and if I was to take a videotape of how they act in certain opportunities, they wouldn't recognize themselves, because the whole environment has gotten to be a copycat environment. We're not anomalies anymore.
Right.
And so what I think we have to do is we don't have to do more, we have to do less.
Okay.
As we be a parent, listen to your child. They will guide you.
Danny, we're going to close this out, but I quickly just go through this BYS Plus Special Needs. I think it's a fabulous program, and there might be some parents out there that are interested. Tell us a little bit about it in about a minute.
Yeah, you got it. What we do is we take kids, regardless of their ability, cognitive ability level. So kids who truly need one-on-one assistance, kids who are just one iota short of being successful in the typical recreation program. We put them in an environment where we pair them up with a teen student athlete. This way, not only are the kids getting, and all sports specific, we're just not rolling balls out, but they get real kinesthetic sports training. But more importantly, no one wants to do it with old fart nice guy Danny Bernstein.
Right.
They want to do it with a peer. They want to play amongst themselves. And we have found these student athletes who find that their love of game has allowed them not to do community service, but share their love of game with somebody else. And what we allow sports to teach us, and which is what we were learning back in 1974, that we have a sacred responsibility to be engaged in sports to the best that we can be. And our special needs program allows communities to get together, connect, and not do community service, but share their love of sports to make the community better.
Danny, how would they contact you if they're interested? What's the best way?
www.byardsportscares.org, 914-304-4052.
I'm going to ask you to repeat the URL, but I want you to spell it out slowly. Go ahead.
Thank you. www.byardsports+.org. byardsports+.org.
And I will have a link for you people listening too. Danny Bernstein from Backyard Sports. This has been a tremendous time. I appreciate it. You're like an icon in youth sports. You're doing everything right. And I want to thank you for coming on, and don't run away after we sign off.
I'm not going to. I love you, Marty. After all these years, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.